In the last few years, we've seen relatively small studios walk away with major awards and capture players' hearts. If you look at 2025, the Game of the Year race will probably come down to Expedition 33, Split Screen, and Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, all games made by small teams on what you might call responsible budgets. So the obvious question is, where are the big budget AAA games? You know, the ones that cost hundreds of millions of dollars to make. They can masterfully create hype and excitement out of nothing, thanks to their seemingly bottomless marketing budgets, but aside from that, nothing? Which brings us here. In this video, I want to look at a few simple questions. Do we still need AAA games? Do they even make sense anymore in today's gaming landscape? Are they collapsing under their own weight? Like I said, soggy cake. First of all, what is a AAA game exactly? Well, to be honest, there isn't a solid definition. You could argue a AAA game is one made by a famous studio, or maybe it's the one with the fanciest graphics, or the one with cinematics that are better than a Marvel movie, or perhaps it's simply the game that demands 80 hours or more of your life before you can finally roll the credits. After reading around, I settled on this. A AAA game is a game that costs a lot to make and requires a very large team to complete. Think budgets of at least $50 million and 100 people or more working on it. And yes, that definition is vague, but there's a reason. Because the whole AAA label was borrowed from the bond rating system in finance, where AAA means a safe investment, not one that pays the highest returns, but one you can trust you will get your money back and then some. Back in the late 1990s, when that term really caught on, a game marked AAA was basically guaranteed to be a commercial success, not just for the developer, but also for the wholesalers and retailers. Remember them? The label was a way of saying, this game is safe, it's good, gamers will love it, and you, retailer, can stack it high in your warehouse, because it will fly off the shelves. And how exactly did anyone know this? Well, mostly vibes, and a few very persuasive salesmen, I guess. Let's be fair here, the very first AAA games really were something special. They didn't just raise the bar, they showed that the bar could be raised, and how. Final Fantasy VII is often recognized as the first true AAA game, not just because it cost around $40 to $45 million in 1997, which would be roughly $80 to $90 million today, but because of what it delivered. Cinematic CGI, movie-like presentation, a dynamic camera that made battles feel alive, and, above all, a story people still talk about almost 30 years later. For the kids of 1997, it was like someone opened a portal to another dimension and said, "Welcome, this is your life now." After that, the AAA stamp started appearing on all sorts of high production value games, like Half-Life, Shenmue, Halo, Call of Duty, Assassin's Creed, GTA, Battlefield, and plenty more. And honestly, at the time, the stamp was deserved. So, if you want to be precise, and we do, AAA games weren't just about big teams and big budgets. They usually came with a sprawling world, very likely a vast open world, an original carefully crafted narrative, cutting-edge graphics, remember the meme? But can it run Crysis? And in theory, a high level of polish, as in no game-breaking bugs, no immersion-ruining glitches, etc. That was the promise of AAA, the gold standard, the big leagues, at least in theory. But are we really seeing all of that lately? Are AAA games the only ones capable of delivering these things? Or can they even deliver them anymore? The honest answer is, not really. How many big budget games now ship with a massive day one patch? Or two, or three? It's almost a feature at this point. The poster child here is of course Cyberpunk 2077, an absolute debacle at launch. But it's not alone. Anthem launched with bugs, very little content, and no real idea of what it wanted to be. Redfall shipped with broken AI. Battlefield 2042 had performance issues, not so great maps, and yes, a nice healthy serving of bugs, because what's a AAA launch without a buffet of bugs? And what about the story? What about those gripping narratives we used to expect? Well, the landscape is patchy at best. The worst offenders tend to be the established franchises, endlessly recycling what worked before, but with less and less inspiration each time. I still remember Assassin's Creed 2. I was genuinely hooked, piecing the story together little by little. I haven't played any AC titles since then, but from what I gathered, the series hasn't really delivered on the narrative front. Each release feels like a remix of the same formula, just with a slightly different historical hat. Probably the only real highlight was Black Flag, and even then not for the story, but because it lets you be a pirate. What about technological advancements? Cutting-edge graphics? Sure, AAA games often look great and feel smooth. But here's the thing, that's not an exclusive club anymore. Engines like Unreal and Unity have leveled the playing field. Small studios can now make games that look amazing and feel great to play. Which leads to the question, how far can graphics really be pushed? And at what cost? Because look realistic doesn't automatically translate to is fun. And this brings us to another problem, the hardware. What does it take to replicate on a PC or console those cutting-edge graphics? Not everyone can buy the latest AMD or Nvidia top-of-the-line GPU that, incidentally, are merely reaching the price of a decent used car. And the car at least helps you get to work, so you can earn money to buy the next GPU or console. It seems pretty clear that AAA studios aren't the shining beacons they used to be back in the early 2000s. If anything, we now have AA studios or indie punching well above their weight and putting those big studios to shame. A few quick examples: Larian Studios with Baldur's Gate 3, Sandfall Interactive with Clair Obscur Expedition 33, Ninja Theory with Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, or Zaum with Disco Elysium. These are just a few examples off the top of my head, but feel free to add to the list. There are many more, I'm sure. So, what are AAA games actually good for in 2025? A very cynical answer would be, not much. Most of them feel bloated, giant projects plagued by production problems, endless delays, and cost a fortune to make. In fact, according to a 2023 UK Competition and Markets Authority report, the budget for large PC or console games has skyrocketed from about $50 million in 2018-2019 to $200 million in 2024-2025. And that's just development. Add marketing on top, and you're basically funding almost 2 Marvel movies. Which brings us to the scary part. We are fast approaching the billion-dollar game. And the big question is, who's paying for it? Let me do some quick back-of-the-envelope calculations. Say a game costs $300 million to make, once include marketing. You shave off a 30% cut for Steam. Then to keep the shareholders happy, the developer needs at least a 30% operating margin. The industry average seems a bit higher, but let's keep it conservative. If the game sells at $70, that means it has to sell over 6 million copies just to break even, and more than 8.7 million copies to hit the margin target. Put it simply, within a year, it needs to generate about $610 million in revenues. And more often than not, they have to come from box sales and in-game purchases. So it's no surprise that we're seeing more and more AAA titles marred by, let's call them, questionable monetization practices. And things are only going to get worse. According to a report from December 2024 by the Boston Consulting Group, a very large and influential management consulting firm, gaming's annual revenue growth will slow down to about 5% by 2028. Meanwhile, the cost's annual growth rate will rise to about 8%. No company can survive when their costs are growing faster than their revenues. You don't need an expensive consultant to tell you that. So what's the solution? Well, BCG has few ideas, and none of them involve making better games. The ones that I like most are: use AI in game development more aggressively, segment players by willingness to pay, which basically means if you love a franchise and can get enough of it, they'll rob you blind. And the best one? Explore advertising. Not just in mobile games, no, on PC and console games. Imagine this: you're fighting the final boss, health is at 1%, and suddenly, ad break. Sorry. It's time to feel ashamed of your personal hygiene habits, or become addicted to another brand of energy drink. But don't worry, they also recommend giving players in-game rewards for watching ads. How magnanimous. If you stay quiet for a second, you can already hear screams of joy from far away. It's the speedrunners celebrating. In a previous video, I covered what I call the enshittification of the gaming industry. Feel free to check it out for the full context. But in short, spiraling development costs paired with a corporate obsession with greed is good are making games worse on one side and making the AAA label meaningless on the other. At this point, AAA feels less like an immersive, groundbreaking experience worth your time, money, and a couple of your internal organs as well, and more like a badly developed product designed to please shareholders and stuffed with predatory monetization. Overall, the AAA model feels flawed, at least in its current state. Development costs are sky high. Production cycles stretch out for 4 to 6 years if nothing goes wrong, which it usually does. Shareholders demand maximum revenue per user, which inevitably means not some microtransactions, grindy sections designed on purpose, so you are forced to buy skips, and bits of the game cut out and resold later as DLC or resource packs. Pair all that with a lack of genuine innovation, because new ideas are risky and shareholders don't like risky, and you can safely argue that the AAA model has reached the end of the line. Luckily, gaming isn't just AAA. Smaller AA and indie studios are still taking risks, experimenting, and delivering games that actually feel like someone cared. They do it on smaller budgets, but somehow manage to connect with players in ways that multi-million-dollar projects can't. Funny how that works. Just to be clear, I'm not saying AAA games should disappear entirely, but let's be realistic. How many fully monetized $70 AAA games can the average player afford in a year? 1? 2? If they cancel their Netflix sub, maybe 3? If that's the case, how many AAA games can the industry afford to release and still keep the lights on? Let's test this with a little thought experiment. It's slightly absurd, but indulge me for a second. Take GTA 6. If all goes well, it will be the golden standard of AAA. Polished gameplay, breathtaking graphics, an insanely detailed world. Development and marketing costs easily north of $500 million. It will sell millions of copies at $70 each. Some players will even upgrade their PC or buy the PS5 Pro just to play it as intended. So extra costs for them. And yes, it promises hundreds and hundreds of hours of uncompromised fun. Can anything else compete with GTA 6 in 2026? Probably not. But the industry can't just put itself in a cryogenic freezer and wait until 2027. Other AAA games will still launch that year, and they'll need to be hits as well. Otherwise, studio closures, franchises cancelled or put on hold. Which leads to a bizarre scenario. The few people who aren't playing GTA 6 basically have to shoulder the burden of keeping every other AAA release afloat. Those poor non-GTA players are doomed to work and grind 24/7, not for loot, but to keep the rest of the industry alive. Okay, yes, that's exaggerated, but you get the point. When every AAA game costs more than $200 million to make, the money has to come back somehow. Whether the game is a masterpiece or a dud, it doesn't matter. The shareholders demand a return on investment, and they're going to get it, one way or another. The harsh reality is that players' resources, time and money, are finite, and the financial side, it's not getting any better, with everything else going on in the world in this moment. Something has to give, otherwise we may go from too many AAA games to none that deserves that label, and it could happen faster than we think. Back in 2012, Alex Hutchinson, the then creative director of Assassin's Creed 3, spoke at the Game Developers Conference and painted two dystopian futures for the gaming industry. In one, the only games that sell are those built around analytics, obsessed with squeezing every dollar out of players. In the other, studios are locked in a massive arms race, pushing graphical fidelity and sheer game scale at any cost. He compared this race to a cancerous growth, one that could eventually leave AAA blockbusters as nothing more than the last of the dinosaurs. He concluded saying that video games should aim to either educate, entertain, or at least strive to be artistic, and if they don't, the industry is in for a rough patch. Well, more than 10 years later, it looks like we didn't pick one dystopian future. We said, why not both? And went for the combo meal. A little bit of monetization obsession, a little bit of graphics arms race, with a generous side of creative stagnation. Can the big studios change course and return to a more genuine way of making games? Or is it time to step aside and let smaller studios lead the way, since they seem far more in touch with both games and reality? Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and maybe subscribe. That would really help my channel. And see you in the next video. Bye bye.